removed from it. Yeah. I mean, some of the films, especially the first one, when you watch the first one, I mean, you could tell that it was a very low budget kind of experimental thing that Lucas didn't have a lot of money or support for. You can really feel that when you watch that film. But, to a lot of people, that really adds to the charm of it as well, because it forced him to not be as outlandish as he would become in the prequels, when he had basically literally every cookie in the cookie jar in front of him and could do whatever he wanted. This one, he had to cut the corners. So yeah, I mean, that's why I think it's fantastic. It's also one of the things that I think hampers Star Wars in some way, but we'll talk about that probably.
I agree with you. The fact that back in the first three, he couldn't go, "Oh, I can't get the shot. I'll fix it later in post" or something like that. It was like, well, you have to get it now. You have to make this look good now, because there is no real post in terms of like, the 1, 2, and 3, Phantom Menace to whatever it was. They're all pretty much CGI films. They're a case of, hey, look what we can do, that kind of stuff. Where Star Wars, the first 3, he had to actually do it. And with the re-releases of all them all, and now it's basically, as you said, he's got all the cookies in the jar now going, cool, I can chuck in this random monster walking past the screen and it looks like shit because it's so obvious the fact it's a fake monster going through. Yeah, the originals I do like them.
I do too. I love them. It takes me back to my youth. This is the kind of movie that I'd watch on a Sunday afternoon, rainy afternoon with my dad. And, my dad was the big Star Wars geek in the family. My mum, bless her, she has absolutely no interest in Star Wars whatsoever. That's okay. Let her do whatever she wants. But no, this sort of really takes me back. And, even watching them today, I love the cinematography. Even though it's not the fanciest, it's so basic that it's perfect. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And being a Star Wars fan, what are your thoughts on the prequels, honestly?
I'm a prequel apologist. I'm somebody who's a really, really big fan of the films. All of them, really. I think the lowest rating I've given any Star Wars film is a 6 out of 10.
Jeez, that's not bad. Which one did you give the 6 out of 10 to?
I've given 4 films a 6 out of 10 in Star Wars, so that's...
let me guess.
1, 2, 3, and 6, is it? 7?
No, it would be 1, 2... 6 and 7.
Wow.
I'm actually a huge fan of the third film, especially. See, this is the thing that I try to justify it with, and a lot of people don't care. But it's been my contention, especially of late, especially starting the podcast and discussing film and Star Wars and things like that way more often than I used to. I think The Empire Strikes Back, because George Lucas didn't direct it and he didn't even write the screenplay. All he wrote was the story for it. So if you think about Empire in terms of the rest of the saga, it feels the least Star Wars because it's not nearly as, kind of cheesy and silly and whatever that a lot of the other films have. I mean, even the first one does. 6 definitely does. The prequels, of course, definitely do. And 7, they threw that in there for nostalgia's sake. But Empire's not like that at all. And when they made that film, it's such a great film. I mean, remove the sci-fi elements from it entirely. It just works so perfectly well as a story. It's so well shot. It's so well made. It changed Star Wars forever. It made it into something that Lucas hadn't originally envisioned it to be. So when he got the keys to the kingdom back and he wanted to make the prequels, and I imagine this for a moment, back in the day when he was getting ready to fire up Phantom Menace, he wanted to have Spielberg direct episode 1. He wanted Francis Ford Coppola to do episode 2, and he wanted to do episode 3. And Spielberg was the one that talked him out of it and said, no, this is your thing. You should do it yourself. Imagine episode 1 by Spielberg. Imagine episode 2 by Coppola. I mean,
it wouldn't work. I don't think it would work, would it?
Well, I mean, maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't, and we'll never know now. But I mean, Lucas's contention, and this is the thing that I stick to as a Star Wars fan, is that Lucas's contention was always that these are space soap operas, and even in the original trilogy, especially Carrie Fisher's acting rest in peace, is incredibly soap opera-ish. Like, she's incredibly, like, she's overacting most of the time, especially in Jedi. It's terribly noticeable in Jedi. So when he made the prequels, he didn't have anybody else there that was in charge of the look and the feel of these films. So he really, truly gave them that kind of cheesy soap opera-ish quality that he wanted. So I try to forgive him for that. He's a terrible actor's director. That much is definitely true.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I like watching all the behind the scenes of that and all that sort of the special effects where they try and say they do the very diplomatic answers to that. You know, like, what's it like to work with George Lucas? It's a wonderful experience. It's someone who's a visionary of our time. They never actually say, yeah, he's awesome, he's really good. Yeah. It's like, no, we're just going to say he's a good guy.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's an honor to just be a part of a Star Wars film. It's an honor to just be a part of that entire experience. But yeah, no, I absolutely, and Revenge of the Sith, the third prequel, it's actually my second favorite Star Wars movie. I don't think they're that bad. As long as you just have to accept their flaws as well. And I don't think a lot of people are willing to do that because, like I said, if you think about Empire, think about how like perfectly dark and dramatic that film is. The prequels are, I mean, there's some of that there, but it's so overwashed in all of the cheesiness that it kind of gets lost a little bit. And a lot of people grew up watching Empire. They grew up watching the original Star Wars, which, like I said, has its cheesier moments, and Jedi, which the Ewoks notwithstanding, has like really good dramatic stuff in it. So, yeah, when you kind of return back to what Lucas originally wanted it to be, yeah.
I love the Ewoks.
I fucking hate the Ewoks.
My little sister used to have an Ewok toy that my Nana bought her before she passed away. And this bloody awful thing, I mean, they're cute in the show, but this thing would laugh and it had light up eyes. And even when we took out the batteries and hid it in the back of the cupboard, because it was detected motion, this thing would be laughing in the back of the cupboard. It was the most terrifying thing.
That sounds terrifying, yeah.
They're so cute.
All I remember of the Ewoks is the cartoon. The cartoon. That's all God. I remember. And I just remember the theme song. You know how you get some theme songs in your head? Like, I have that. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying I have that in my head.
Literally every day of his life, it's just the Ewok cartoon theme song in his head.
Oh, God. And then the occasional DuckTales thrown in there, which is good.
Woo-hoo.
Yep, thank you. It's good to know that that's an international law.
Only with people of our generation, dear.
I did. Yeah. I work with a 22-year-old and I was trying to tell him why I was so excited about this, the new DuckTales coming out. And I said, and it's international law. If anyone ever says the word DuckTales, you have to say, woohoo.
Woo!
Yeah. And he's like, why? It's just a cartoon. And I'm like, I realise now I'm older than you. This is not cool. I was like, no.
We're going to stop having this conversation now, and I'm going to go over there.
I'm getting a coffee. Why? I am right now. I need to go. I'm going to go have a cigarette. You don't smoke. I do now. I do now. Yeah.
So it's funny. It's funny how you say that you quite enjoyed the prequels as well, because I think, I was having to think about it while we were talking about it, and I love the original films, always have done. What I didn't like about the prequels is how, I suppose when you're looking at almost like the background, that very bland scene that he'd set in the first three films, where it was either in the dark or, there was a lot of sandy planets that they went to, that sort of,
Yeah.
I found that really the only one that really got into that was probably the first of the prequels, where they spent a lot of time on, was it Naboo?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the colours are, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I just found that they didn't really hold true to the original films. They didn't, probably didn't try hard enough to stay close to the original films. But then, in saying that, we saw the what was it, number 7 recently? What was that one called?
Force Awakens.
Force Awakens, yeah.
Yeah, see, I should know that, but it's only new. But like The Force Awakens, what I loved about that was how close to the originals they made that. Like it seemed like you were watching, 3, 4, or 5 again with newer, more modern characters. Did you find that?
Yeah, that was one of my biggest criticisms of The Force Awakens, actually, is when I watched it, the further into the movie I got, the angrier I got, because it is literally a scene-for-scene remake of A New Hope. It's like literally you could take events in A New Hope and you can take events in The Force Awakens. Like, it opens with a member of the rebellion or resistance giving plans to a droid who then escapes across a desert planet and then is found by our plucky hero, and then they blast their way off the desert planet in the Millennium Falcon. It's like, Jesus Christ. It was just way, way, way too much like A New Hope. And I get, like, people justify it. They say, well, Lucas ruined it because he made the prequels, so they had to kind of bring back the Star Wars that everybody knew and everybody loved. And I mean, I guess they definitely succeeded in that regard. But for me, as somebody who enjoys all of it, like, I love the originals. I like the prequels. I wouldn't say I love them, except for the third one. I really do think the third one's a phenomenal film. But even still, like, for me, I'm just like, no, I wanted something more original. I wanted something more new. And I love the new characters. I think they're fantastic, but oh my God. Yeah, like that, I could not tell you how frustrated I was as it literally goes through another scene. Oh, look, now they're attacking this giant Death Star thing. Oh, God.
I used to work in radio, and whenever time it came up, like there would be a new cover song, I used to try and find the original and play them at the beginning and just see how, like, if they were a little bit faster, a little bit slower, they sang so. I was that much of a nerd. And as you say that, it was quite funny, because as we got out of A Force Awakens at 2 a.m. or whatever time it was, Bex was like, that was the best, that was amazing, that was cool. I said the same as you. I went, that was A New Hope, all over again. Yeah. She says, what do you mean? You've got a robot that everyone's going to love and sell a lot of toys. As you said, there's a desert planet, there's the plucky hero, there's the Millennium Falcon, there's the bad guy with the bad breathing and the weird voice. It's just like, everything's there. And there was even the cameo. I even broke it down to the fact of there was a cameo of a stormtrooper who you shouldn't know because he's a stormtrooper, and yet everyone's going to make a big deal about it. Yeah. New Hope, the guy that smacks his head, everyone knows that guy now.
And Simon Pegg.
No, Force Awakens, it was Daniel Craig.
Yes, and Simon Pegg was in it too.
Yeah, he was the fat guy.
He was the junk dealer.
Yeah.
The big fat dude on the...
Yeah.
Things
like that. You're like, that should,
Yeah.
If they'd used someone else's voice for the Daniel Craig one, or Daniel Craig put on an accent, you probably would have gone, cool, that's just some other dude. What? That's Daniel Craig? But as soon as it starts up, it's like, yeah, that's Bond.
But
yeah, that's Bond.
But it's funny, because, now that I've been listening to you guys talking about how similar New Hope and The Force Awakens are, my brain just went, oh, yeah.
See, I'm not the only one that makes up.
It's one of those things where... Yeah, I mean, especially, like, when you watch it on subsequent, like, reviewings or whatever, it becomes even more and more apparent, like, once you kind of start to, like, really dissect into the whole thing. Especially, I think it's about the first... I don't know, I would say maybe, like, the first third of the movie or so. Once they leave the desert planet, like once they get into space, then it starts to kind of dabble in more than just A New Hope. It grabs a few different things from Empire. I mean, you've got the scenes where Kylo Ren and Hux are talking to Snoke, and those scenes are very reminiscent of, like, Vader talking to the hologram of the Emperor in Empire. So, it borrows things from other things, and it gets a little bit better once they get off the desert planet, but especially like I said about the first third of the film. Like, I mean, think about it. Like, in A New Hope, how does A New Hope start? It starts with the Star Destroyer chasing the Tantive, and then it captures it, and then, Leia hides the Death Star plans on the droid, and then Vader boards the ship. In The Force Awakens, the Imperial forces or First Order, whatever the hell you want to call them, they land on the planet. Meanwhile, Poe Dameron, I think Poe Dameron. He hides the plans in the little BB-8, sends him off on his own, and then Kylo Ren comes out, and then has this badass scene as this dude in a mask who has this weird voice,